I'd like to welcome everybody to the Information Security Governance, which is an Afro-Latino collaboration between the ISACA Kampala and the Medellin chapters. I'd like to welcome everybody, and I hope we have a very interesting and fulfilling session. We have a lot of guests coming across the globe. We have folks from Australia, Bolivia, Botswana, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, DR Congo, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, El Salvador, Ghana, my home, Guatemala, India, Indonesia, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Mexico, Netherlands, Nigeria, Pakistan, Panama, Peru, the Philippines, Rwanda, Serbia, Singapore, South Africa. We have folks from Sri Lanka, Switzerland, Tanzania, Tunisia, Uganda, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, United States, Uruguay, Venezuela, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and I'm sure we have folks who more or less registered not long ago that are not captured here. We'd like to warmly welcome you to today's session. I would like one of the organizers or the technical team to take us through the housekeeping rules, and then we can proceed from there. Thank you very much.
So good morning, everybody. My name is George, and we're going to have simultaneous interpretation for everybody. So we are going to enable it as soon as I finish. You're going to see this world that says interpretation, and then you have to choose either one of the languages, because if not, you're not going to listen to anything. So you should choose English or Spanish according to the language you want to hear. Buenos días, va a haber interpretación simultánea para todos. Por favor, cuando ahorita que habiliten la interpretación, tienen que escoger el canal por el cual quieren oír, tienen que escoger uno para poder oír la interpretación simultánea. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think before we proceed, I would like to welcome a very noble guest from ISACA HQ. Megan, can you say one or two words? Bernard, is Megan able to say one or two words, please?
I don't think so. I think we can proceed.
Okay, that's fine. In terms of history between Africa and the Latin Americas, I think over 200 million years ago, we have Africa and Latin being part of one continent. We have a lot of similarities when it comes to cultural influences, our music, our cuisine, our foods. We also have a lot of Asian wonders across. We have the pyramids in Mexico, we have Peru, we have Sudan, and obviously Egypt. In terms of commonalities, we also have post-colonial governments and cooperation in independent movements. Most of our economies are also developing as we speak in terms of high growth. And then in terms of technology connections, we have 4 submarine internet cables from Brazil to Angola to Cameroon, Cape Verde, and then Senegal. In terms of chapters, we have about 23 in Latin America as we speak, and we have 18 chapters in Africa. The expectation and ISACA HQ will tell you that Africa and Latin America have the highest growth rate when it comes to the number of chapters and how they are growing. So we expect a lot of growth as we proceed along the years. In terms of agenda, we'll be looking at 3 very distinguished speakers. The first topic will be by Mr. Alexander Zapata-Leni, who will be talking to us about cybersecurity and information security governance using COBIT 2019. We would also have cybersecurity governance for fintechs and small and medium enterprises, and that will be taken by Mr. James Moritu. And then we'll delve into the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, and that will be done by Mr. Juan Manuel Madrid. After that, we will take some questions, and then we may call it a day as and when we get to that point. So I'd like to start off by introducing Mr. Alexander Zapata-Leni, who holds CISA CIGIT and CIRIS. He's the Vice President of the ISACA Medellin chapter. He's an accredited trainer of COBIT 5 and COBIT 2019 foundations. And he's also been an implementation member in terms of what ISACA did in 2014 and 2015. He's also been part of COBIT 2019 foundation and then 2019 design and implementation. He's the Director of IT Governance and Operations across Latin America, Colombia, Peru, Salvador, and then other countries in Latin America. Mr. James Muritu has over 20 years experience as an IT professional, having held multiple senior positions across blue chip international multinationals across Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Uganda, and then Australia. He's currently the CEO, the group CEO with a leading fintech with operations across Kenya, Uganda, and Nigeria. Our last but not least speaker will be Mr. Juan Manuel Madrid. He is an associate professor of ICT department in a university. He's an APMG accredited instructor for ISACA CSX and the CSX courses. He's an IEE senior member with over 19 experience in information security, with emphasis in management, computer forensics, and cybersecurity. At this point, I think we'll take the first presentation by Mr. Alexander Zapata. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Are you hearing me well? Can you confirm it?
Yeah, Alex, I can hear you.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all the participants in this event. This event is the first collaborative event that we have created from ISACA, from the African Latin America chapters. So we are two regions with a lot of similarities, but it's not common to have this kind of event. So I really appreciate it, and I feel so happy to be part of this event, and I hope that this event will be great and will be very good for everybody. Everybody has good ideas from the topics that we are going to talk. So thank you. My topic is about information security and cybersecurity governance implementation using COBIT 2019. I know when you talk about information security and cybersecurity, you always think about ISO 27000, NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Obviously, we are going to talk about those frameworks because are oriented to security. But I want to share you some approaches that I have used in some clients in consultancy projects that I have performed, because it's interesting that COVID 2019 has evolved and has many good practices related to information security and cybersecurity. So I want to share that, and I want to talk about some specific topics that are going to be expanded in some publications named focus areas. These focus areas are going to these focus areas are, some of them are not yet published. There is only one that is published that I'm going to show you, is the information security and cybersecurity. It will be really interesting that you use it if you have the chance, because it's really focused to the topic that we are talking in this conference. So there are many focus areas. Actually, the focus areas are related to many trends that your organizations are facing now. And you have to think about those areas, because those areas impact your information security governance. My presentation is not going to be technical, okay? I'm going to go to the back to basics, because when I am with an organization, I always recommend that it's important, the tools are important, the automation is important in information security, of course, but you have to go back to basics, because you have to think about how to govern the information security. What process do you have to define in order to have a good strategy, a good approach? So that's the topic that I'm going to share with you. This slide compiles what is my proposal to define the main processes related to information security governance and management. There are 5 processes that I usually recommend. This is a personal approach, okay? And I have included in the presentation the references to COVID 2019. There is a publication that is free for everybody, if you are a member or non-member of ISACA. The name is Governance and Management Objectives, that you can download from the website of ISACA. I will share the where you can do that if you haven't done. But it's a really interesting publication that you can use it in order to define the strategy to govern and to manage information security and cybersecurity. So there are 5 processes, okay? The first process is per se the information security governance. And there are some very important topics that you have to include in this area. The first topic that is very important for your organization is to define what is the risk appetite and what is the tolerance related to information security and cybersecurity. And you have to think that you have to involve the board of directors in your organization, the top management. So because the governance of information security obviously will be supported in many tools and many operative practices, but the first step is to have the support from the top management. And in some organizations, there are some rules, some regulations related to how are you going to keep the information security. So it's really important to define that, the risk appetite and the tolerance, and that must be defined by the board or the governing bodies. For example, the risk committee, that is a governing body where the board of directors participate, and the risk area too. Other parts that are really important here are to define the information security management system. That is related to the APO 13. APO 13 is a process in COBIT 2019, and it has 3 practices. And those practices are oriented to that. How do you define an information security management system? What are the roles that you require to define, to create, or to implement the information security system? Because the information security system must be alive. And that depends on people. So it's really important that you have defined those roles, those responsibilities. You have to orient all the information security and cybersecurity strategy to risk. So it's really important that you have a risk treatment responses, define it in the organization. So that part is part of you can see it in the process APO 13. I will show you some of the practices, not all that I've chosen here because I only have 20 minutes, but you can check it there. It's important to define the policies, the guidelines. That is the governance part of information security. The second part is really important, is the identification, classification, and protection of information assets. One pain point that our organization has is that they don't have identified what are the jewels of the crown. You have to think about what are the information assets that are critical, and you have to protect and to focus all the strategy of cybersecurity and information security to those information assets. That is really important, and that is a pain point because when you define an information asset, you have to define an owner who is going to be accountable to define the classification of the assets according to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And some organizations say, okay, the owner is IT, but not necessarily is a good practice. The owner of the information assets has to be someone from the business side who is going to be accountable for the quality of the information assets. So it's really important to think about that. You can see in COBIT at APO 01.07 is the practice oriented to identification and classification. And there is one process, APO 14 and DSS 0606, that are oriented to the protection. I will show some of these, okay? Because it's interesting that you see that I am talking about some things that you can find in the document. This is the governance and management objectives. For example, if you see the APO 14, you can see all the related practices to protect the life cycle of the data. deletion of the data. So it's really important that you think about this, and this is part of the second area that I'm proposing. The third area is identification and access management. It's other pain point for the organizations because it's related to how do you identify all the users, services, devices that access the asset management. Sorry, are you hearing me well? Because are you hearing me well?
Yeah, Alex, we can hear you now. I think you can.
Right now, we can hear you well.
Oh, but what part did I miss? Sorry. Could you hear the first part? Or, okay, I will continue. So identification, classification, and protection assets is really important. Do you hear that part? Okay. Yes?
I think you can proceed.
Okay. The third part is the identification, the identity and access management. This is really important because it's related to how do you identify all the users, all the devices, services that access your information access. So it's really important that you have a process to do that identification, do that authentication. And obviously, it's very important to have a process for the multi-factor authentication, the privilege access management. And you can see all those things in COBIT in DSS 0504, that is a process, and DSS 0603. I will show you here. This is the document of the governance and management objectives, and you can see this practice here. This is DSS, let me see, 259. This is the managed identity and access management. And you will see very good things that are related to this part, okay? The fourth part is the assurance of the digital services. This is related to all the malware protection, security network, and endpoint security. These are really important things now, because now is really important to assure the attack surface has been expanded. And you have to think about how do you secure the endpoint? How do you secure all your network? And that is really important to be governed. You can see that in DSS 05, 01, 02, and 03. I can show you that. For example, that is in the page, in the previous page. For example, you see here, manage endpoint security. And there are many good practices that you can include in the definition of the process of governance and management information security. So I would really recommend to use the framework as a base and obviously complement this framework with ISO and NIST. And the last part, not less important, is the security events and incident management. You have to monitor what's happening. In this part, COBIT is not really strong. There is a practice, DSS 0507, but what I recommend is to use the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Juan Manuel is going to talk about later in very detailed way, but it's important to see this framework and to see the function of detection, response, and recovery. So this is the first part that I recommend. The second idea that I want to share is something that is happening in some sectors in Latin America, is DevSecOps. DevSecOps is a trend related to the development process. How do you develop the software in a fast way to interact? Is everything okay? Are you hearing me well? Sorry, I have some issues in my internet, so I want to double check that it's okay.
We can hear you.
Everything's okay.
Perfect, thank you. If something is wrong, Juan Manuel, please let me know. Thank you. So in this part, it's interesting that you see how is the development process. Your organization now maybe are facing the challenge of have rapid developments and to release solution in a rapid way, because the digital transformation requires and all the competitive environment requires that. But you think about of how do you secure that development process. So DevSecOps is one really interesting trend for it's not only related to security, it's related to information technology governance, but it's really interesting that you try to think about what do you have to do related to security. You require secure development practices. That is the BY 03, is related to construction of software identity and build solutions. You have to have very good tests. You require static tests, dynamic tests, because you require that your solutions go secure to operations. So it's really interesting. These slides are going to you are going to have it, and here I have included all the things that you have to consider from COBIT 2019 to have a good governance of this. Obviously, this kind of methodology is based on security by design. So you have a good design from the beginning, and you have a good process to integrate the solution that you are developing to the operations. Here are processes such as enterprise architecture, or the construction process, the configuration management that is very important in order to have a good security baseline for the platforms. So it's a really good trend that, and it will be a focus area for that ISACA is going to publish. I don't know when, I hope soon, but it's really interesting to consider all these processes that I have included here. Other area that is very important is cloud computing. I imagine that all of you are adopting cloud computing for several business processes, and you have to think how to govern cloud computer, and you have to think how the cloud computing is adopted, and how are you going to secure it? Because is not responsible if you think, okay, I'm going to hire cloud, so the supplier is going to be responsible for the security. No, you have to govern all the process for cloud. So you requires good processes of enterprise architecture, service level agreement, supplier management, and other processes related to security. For example, in cloud computing is very important that you see what happened with your data. So you're required to govern and to have tools such as CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, because you need to know what happened with your data in cloud. So in these 3 slides, I'm sharing how to focus all the governance and management security, how to approach to DevSecOps is one trend that you are using, and how to approach to cloud computing. Okay, obviously this is a personal approach. Okay, because the focus areas are not really still published, but is really interesting. The final part that I want to share with you is, when you think about the governance and management of information security and cybersecurity, you have to think in an holistic approach. You have to think about the 7 components. And you can use, and this is the last part of my presentation, you can use the COBIT focus area, okay? I don't know if you know this publication, but this publication is amazing. It's amazing because it's oriented to all the things that I talked at the beginning of my presentation, but focused on information security. You can look for these resources in that website that I'm sharing here in the slide. But I will going to share some of the parts of the focus area. Okay, the focus area is not a free document; you have to pay for it. But it's really interesting. It's a really interesting publication. For example, you can see all the components here. I will show some parts. Okay, let me go directly to the page. For example, you can see roles and responsibilities. You remember that I mentioned this because it's really important that you govern information security from the board. And here you can see what are the responsibilities from the board, executive committees, chief security officer, and all those functions that are related to security. So this is really interesting. This is related to one of the components. There is other component information. You can see here some information parts that are really important, such as information security strategy, budget, program, requirements, review report. So you can see many kinds of information flows that can be used for security. There is other part that is really interesting, are the skills. You can see specific skills for information security governance. Okay, and you can see what skills and are required in order to govern the information security, and these skills are related to the different roles that are proposed. So this is really interesting. I really recommend you this document because it's focused on information security. I know that that my colleagues are going to talk about NIST Cybersecurity, that is the most recommended framework for cybersecurity, and ISO 27000. But I want to tell you that COBIT has some really good resources that could be used in combination with all those resources that I have mentioned. You can see, for example, specific policies such as access control policy, for example, information security and privacy policy, personal information security policy, etc. So you can see many policies too here. You can see too, for example, what aspects are really important for, related to culture. Yes, because the culture is really important. The behavior is really important. So you can see here some behavior on some cultural aspects that are really important to implement the governance and management of information security governance. Such as, and the last part is you can see all the 40 all governance and management objectives that in the publication that is free for everyone in ISACA, but you can see them focused on security. So this is a really well document and is really interesting. I want to finish here because I only wanted to say you COBIT 2019 is a good framework to be used. It's important that you back to basis because you always think about technical solutions, but you have to go back to basis and you have to think about the processes, the main processes that you have to define. You have to think about the good practices that you have to establish in order to have a good information security and cybersecurity governance. So sorry for the technical issues. I hope that you could hear most of the ideas that I wanted to share. The time is too short, so thank you, and thank you to all the participants in this event. Michael, if you want, you can share or Bernard can share the poll question in order to finish and to have some insights and to continue.
That's fine. Whilst that comes up, I think this has been very insightful, all the way from COBIT to ISO to NIST to DevSecOps to cloud computing and all. I think it's been quite insightful. Let's look at what we have now. So Alex, I think you can go on with your full question now.
It's great because you can see this is a big audience. It's more than 236 participants. So it's really interesting to see that the agile software development and DevOps are being used, and it's important to govern. Obviously, the digital transformation and cloud computing to adoption is really important. So I hope this idea will be helpful for everybody, and we can wait some seconds, but I think it's almost finished. No, it's really interesting. One conclusion that I have from this response is that Latin America and Africa are very similar in these kind of things. We are we are very similar in the adoption of these trends and how are we implementing the governance program for information security. So thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the chapters that are participating.
Thank you very, very much, Alex. I think
I can share. Sorry, I don't know if the participants see the results. I am sharing the results now. Can you see? All the participants are seeing the results?
I can quickly share my screen compared to that.
Okay, maybe if Bernard helps us, or at the end of the panel. So thank you, everybody.
All right. thank you very much, Alex. I think we'll now move on to James Mori, who will be taking us through cybersecurity governance for fintechs and small and medium enterprises. James, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, okay. Hello, everybody. I hope you can all hear me loud and clear from all the parts of the world that you are dialing in from.
Yeah. Audio is great, James. Go on.
Okay, good. So let me take this opportunity to say a big thank you for everybody who's managed to join this webinar today. I really want to appreciate you. I'm calling from Nairobi, Kenya. That's where I'm based. And I want to spend the next couple of minutes just to talk you through cybersecurity and informational security governance from an organizational context. I know you've spoken about fintechs and SMEs, but whatever I'm going to talk about can apply to any organization, and not necessarily fintechs and SMEs alone. So my background is information technology, and I've worked in multiple industries across multiple countries. So I'll be sharing what my experience has been across the different industry sectors and countries that I've interacted with. So for the next couple of minutes, I just want to address 4 things. The first one is, I just want us to face the facts in terms of cybersecurity and what the world is facing. The threat is real, and I just want us to spend a couple of minutes to go around that. I will also spend a few minutes just to go through what we refer to as typical organizational reactions. So what has happened, especially during the COVID period, a lot of organizations are going through informational security nightmares. And what you'll see is that different organizations are reacting differently. So I want to spend a few minutes on that. And then very important, I want to talk about the missing link. And this is something that I've seen across a lot of organizations. And I'll be talking about that. And then finally, just an emphasis on hitting the ground and fixing things and ensuring we do things in the right manner. So let's face the facts here. As far as informational security threats are concerned, let me say that the threat is real and it's just become worse during this COVID pandemic. Just to give you some stats, I mean, 70% based on some research that has been done, 70% of cyber professionals have reported increased threats since the emergence of COVID-19. 95% of IT professionals have reported increased security challenges again due to COVID-19. And this is a research that has been done sometime late last year. Phishing attacks since the commencement of the pandemic have actually gone up by 667%. I was reading another research report, and it was saying that the numbers are actually higher. There are more and more phishing attempts. Now, let's face the facts. I mean, cybercrime is now amongst the most profitable ventures in the criminal world. It's actually being reported that it's more profitable than the global illegal drug trade. And it's estimated that by the end of 2021, cybercrime will have costed the world close to $6 trillion. Some astronomical, humongous, enormous numbers. I mean, it's crazy. So if you look at the cost of cybercrime per minute, I mean, the numbers are there. And this is a very recent research. I mean, it's ridiculous how much cybercrime is costing organizations. And it's not just in banks. I mean, I know we are used to seeing reports of cybercrimes in financial institutions, but now it's reached a level where it's affecting everybody. It's affecting financial institutions, it's affecting NGOs, it's affecting banks, it's affecting individuals, it's affecting everybody. And the cost is high and rising every day. So the cost of cybercrime, I mean, it's rising. I will not go through the numbers, but the numbers are there for you to peruse. Some ridiculous numbers. Now, let's face the facts again. I mean, the other fact is that the world has become more chaotic. And why has the world become more chaotic? Is because we now have more devices connected. We've been talking about Internet of Things. It's actually now turning out to be Internet of Everything. We have remote working now. More and more employees are connected. People are working remotely. So I think the emergence of multiple devices, multiple people connecting remotely has just added to the chaos around information. And when you have so much information and data being exposed, then of course the floodgates open for cyber criminals who will want to take advantage of the same. The statistics talk for themselves, and I will not go through that, but it's very clear in this diagram here. Again, I mean, it's a world full of information chaos, and it's not going to stop. The information and the data loads are just going to continue rising and rising and rising. So let me move to the next very interesting area. Now, with all the rise in cyber crimes and the organizational informational chaos that we have across the world, what we are seeing is that organizations are reacting differently. Okay. And I've just given a sample of some of the reactions that organizations are giving out. So it's unfortunate to say that most organizations react in a knee-jerk manner. People cause, panic. And what you'll say is, for some organizations, they will increase their InfoSec budget immediately. One thing that I've seen very common, especially across multiple organizations in Africa, they will get the latest cybersecurity gadgets, they'll get the latest softwares. Maybe they didn't have a CISO role in the organization. They will hire a CISO, they will try patch all the servers. Some devices will be disconnected. For the first time, an organization will want to conduct vulnerability and penetration tests. There will be a lot of secrecy, actually, especially across the financial institutions. They will not want to go public. So what am I trying to say here? It's a knee-jerk reaction, especially when you are faced with cyber threats. And especially when it's something like ransomware, because if it's a ransomware, time is not with you. I mean, you're trying to beat time for your wares to be released, especially when it's a ransom placed on you. So different organizations are behaving very weirdly and in very different fashions. So as organizations face the threats, and as the threats continue increasing, and as the informational and data chaos continue rising, unfortunately, there's a missing link. And the missing link is that organizations are rushing to implement cybersecurity solutions without any supporting governance framework. So, I mean, and I've seen a lot of organizations that tend to concentrate on the technical side of it, but there is no security governance guiding the whole thing that is being done. And unfortunately, without a security governance framework being put in place, then what happens is that everything that will be implemented is short-term in nature. It's something that will solve a problem temporarily, but 6 or 8 months down the road, when the same problem emerges, then again, what you're going to put is a temporary fix. And that's a missing link that I'm seeing across a lot of organizations, not just in Africa. So for my presentation, I will not be going so much deeply into the cybersecurity frameworks. My colleagues will be talking about that. My first colleague has just spoken about COBIT. But let me also talk about the organizational governance that needs to be put in place even before you put in place the cybersecurity framework, because the two go hand in hand. Even as much as you'll be implementing the cybersecurity framework, as an organization, first things first, the organizational governance structure needs to be well secured. So starting at the top, in an ideal organization that is ready to implement a cybersecurity framework, what will happen is that you'll have the MD and the CEO at the top. You'll of course have the CIO slash CTO. For a big organization, you might have a CTO as a separate role. You'll have the board audit and risk committee. And then very importantly, you'll have the CISO function, the Chief Information Security Officer. Another very critical role that is emerging across other organizations, I have not put it here, but let me mention it, is a CDO, a Chief Data Officer. So that's a very common role right now, especially across the financial institutions. So the key players in this whole matrix is of course the board. You have the board of directors who should have a buy-in in the whole cybersecurity framework. Then of course you have the senior management. Then you, of course you have the CISO. Then of course you have the internal auditor. You also have the external auditor. And then finally you have the risk and compliance team. Now, one of the struggles I've seen with small organizations is they'll say the budget is too high. We might not be able to support having all these roles in place, but it's critical. Even if there is no funding, what I've seen in some organizations, you might have a role, two roles being played by one person, all right? So it depends on the budget you have, but the role of the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, that is something that you cannot compromise. You cannot say that the head of IT or the CIO will be your Chief Information Security Officer. That is not going to work because the CISO is a very specialized role with a very specialized background. So my recommendation is don't compromise on the Chief Information Security Officer role. So finally, so once the governance is in place, as far as the organization is concerned, and the buy-in is there at the board level, at the senior management level, now finally you are ready to implement an information security governance program. So what I've shared here is very generic. My colleagues again will be talking more about the frameworks. Of course, there is COBIT 2019. You also have NIST, and there are many other multiple frameworks. But this is the missing link that a lot of people are not thinking about. We are all rushing to buy devices, to buy softwares, to hire more people, and we just fix things without thinking that you need a security governance program that will guide you in that whole journey. I promise not to be very long, and I will end my presentation there. Thank you very much for listening, and I will be welcoming any questions that the audience might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, James. I think I'd like to remind all of us that it's a governance webinar. So as much as possible, we are looking at the very top, the kind of structure you need to put in place to have an effective security governance framework. Thank you very much, and I think it was quite insightful. I think we'll take one Manuel who will take us to our next presentation. Before that, James, would you want to talk about the poll question in terms of what's currently showing? If you can't see it, I could share my screen and then probably could take the team to. This is what we have now. All right, James, do you want to speak to this or you want to wait till we end the session? James, if you can hear me, you are muted.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear your question, Michael. Can you pose the question again?
Okay, I was asking if you want to touch on the poll question as we have it now.
Yeah, so have you already, so the poll question, yes, I believe you've posted that. And have you put the poll yet? Because I have not seen it.
Yes, it's actually up now.
Okay. All right.
What is the biggest cyber threat to your organization?
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, unfortunately, I'm not seeing the poll on my end. Okay, now I can see it. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. So The poll we are running is, what is the biggest cyber threat for your organization? Some very interesting results coming out here. I mean, the biggest threat, and I assumed, yes, that's correct. Data privacy breach seems to be the highest based on the responses we are getting. Ransomware seems to be second. We also have fraud, which is third. We also have business email compromise / CEO fraud, that is coming fourth. Let me say that this is a big thing. If you've not secured your email platform, you really need to think about that, because business email fraud and compromise is something that is also starting to emerge very, very highly. But data privacy breach seems to be the highest amongst the audience. So very interesting results here.
I'm also happy that as part of the organogram you put up, I think you mentioned a chief data officer.
Yep.
Something of that sort. And I think it goes to speak to why a lot of people believe data privacy breach is one of their biggest threats. And I think we can easily complement that with more or less a chief privacy officer who would more or less understand end-to-end the data that the company operates with, the sensitivity around the data, and the alliance controls that we need to put in place to make sure that this data is secured as much as we can. Thanks very much, James, for your presentation. And I think we'll quickly move on to one manual to take us through the last presentation. One. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for attending to this webinar. Thanks again for this collaboration effort that we're having among African and American chapters. This is a great way to share knowledge, and I sure will want to see more and more of these events coming on, in which we can share knowledge and ways of thinking and new ways of applying theories and technology and whatever. Okay, so I'm going to start my presentation here. With Alex and James have spoken about the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. So I'm gonna go deeper on it and see how we can use it as a tool for information security governance. That will be the objective of my talk. Simply understand how the NIST Cybersecurity Framework can be used to leverage our information security governance, and how is it related to other of the frameworks and standards we have mentioned in this panel. Okay, so the first thing we have to do here is to remind ourselves what is information security governance all about. ISACA tells us that the four main functions of governance are to provide strategic direction for the company. That is, in this case, we have to align our information technology and information security strategies with the strategies of our organization. We can't simply go and clash those strategies, because that's not going to work. Okay, the next thing, we have to achieve the objectives of the company. As Alex says, the main objective of any company is making money. So if our strategies in IT are not aligned to that objective of also being profitable for the company, we have to review some things there. The other thing, we have to manage the risk. to see that the risk is being managed, that is to lower it or to take it to an acceptable level. Let's remember that risk can never be completely eliminated. You can reduce it to a certain extent, but you cannot get rid of it completely. So if you manage it, you reduce it to a level in which you can sleep comfortably at night. And the last point will be here to correctly use the resources that the company has given to us for information security or for information technologies. We'll know all those resources are scarce and they have to be wisely used in order to have a healthy IT function and a healthy company. Okay, let's see now how the cybersecurity, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework can help us achieving a good governance. Okay, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework has three components, what are called the core, the tiers, and the profiles. So let's see what is the core all about. The core consists on 5 functions that every company that is concerned about cybersecurity must execute. Those are first, identify, then you have to protect, then you have to detect, then you have to respond, and finally recover. We're gonna explain a little bit further each one of those. Okay, the first thing is about identifying what do we have to protect. And this is one of the most important things you have to do. James mentioned it in his presentation. With all those knee-jerk reactions, people tend to buy this gadget, buy this other one, and to fill yourselves with lots of resources or the last fashionable device that you need to protect your network. But the question is that really helping? So the first thing you have to do is to identify what do you have to protect, because otherwise you could be investing your money in useless things that simply devices or software or practices that will lead nowhere. And in those identification functions, we have some categories. Then you have to identify your assets. That is the information, the software, the hardware, the people that you want to protect. Then you have to be aware of your business environment, the best practices, the threats that are common in that business environment, and so on. Then we have the governance. You see here, one of the key points of identifying is where we have governance or not, and if those functions of governance are really helping the company. Then we have to have a risk assessment strategy. Risk assessment, that is to check or to evaluate the risks that we have to our company, depending on the environment, on our business, etc. Then we have the risk management strategy. How are we going to manage that risk that we have identified here? And finally, we're not alone in the world. We have suppliers and we have clients. And remember that the cybersecurity chain always breaks on the weakest link. So we have also to check the risk of our supply chain, our providers and our clients. Okay, once you have identified what do you want to protect, then you do it. How do you do it? You do it via identity management and access control, that is permissions and identities and whatnot. This is very, very important. Through awareness and training, most of the technological issues or the technological problems linked to cybersecurity have been already solved, but having a good cybersecurity in any company, it's also a matter of culture. If you don't train your people, if you don't teach them how to recognize cyber threats or cyber attacks and how to react to them, you're simply losing your best first line of defense, because a well educated and trained people in your organization are your first line of defense. Okay, there's also data security. There have to be procedures and processes for protecting the information. All those processes and awareness and whatnot have to be maintained. That is, once you establish the policies, the procedures, and etc., you have to revise and to review and to update them, because you know, cybersecurity, in cybersecurity, you always have the analogy of a moving target. Once a new vulnerability or a new trend is discovered, that could take you to an insecure situation when you were secure before all the changes that occurred. Okay, and finally, we have here the protective technology. That is all the devices or software or hardware you want to use for protecting your information. Well, once you have your information protected, you want to be vigilant. That is, you need to detect any cyber threats or cyber attacks that are occurring. Here, you detect any anomalies and events. You have to do it continuously, so you will be protected 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And you have to define your detection processes. Okay, once you detect something, an event or a threat, you have to respond. And here, first thing you have to do, your response has to be planned. As James said, it must not be a knee-jerk reaction. You have to have it orchestrated and well rehearsed, so you can consistently respond to any event in the same way, in an organized way, and a way that doesn't lead to panic. Okay, you have to manage your communications, because if communications are not correctly managed between all the departments on the organization and to the general public, that could lead to hearsay, gossip, and it could lead in some instances to panic. So all the communications in an event have to be correctly managed. Then you have to analyze the event, you have to mitigate it, and you have to propose improvements to your cybersecurity process, so you will be able to react to that kind of cybersecurity event in the future in a much better way. Okay, once you have responded, then you recover the system to again to its working state. So you also have to have your recovery planning, that is your business continuity management, disaster recovery plans. And here you also, this is also, there is also room for improvement here. No disaster recovery plan is perfect. So once you've reached a disaster and you've recovered from it, you can also learn from all those experiences. And finally, you also have to manage the communications about that recovery. Okay. Let's talk a little about the second element of the framework. That's the implementation tiers. A tier allows the organization to, or allows to see how the organization views cybersecurity risk, and shows a little the processes that are implemented to manage the risk. And as you can see here, the tiers are increasingly demanding. For example, for a company that is in a partial tier, the cybersecurity processes might not be completely defined. They might not be known enterprise-wide, and the company can be working alone, that is, without taking any considerations in the supply chain. Once you are in the risk-informed tier, then there is some level of conscience about the cybersecurity, but it might not have been spread to the whole company, and the company begins working with its suppliers and clients and its environment to work together to find cybersecurity solutions. Then you can go to a repeatable tier where all the system kind of works in a very efficient way, and results from cybersecurity events and responses to those cybersecurity events can be repeatable. And finally, you arrive to an adaptive tier, in which you are able to put all these cybersecurity tasks into a continuous improvement cycle. That is, you are able to learn from your errors and to adapt the whole system according to what's happening in the environment. How do you determine your tier? Let's first clarify, tiers are not maturity levels. That is, you, depending on how the cybersecurity meets the organizational goals, that is, how cybersecurity is aligned to the enterprise goals, how feasible it is to implement the things that you want to implement, and how risk is reduced to an acceptable level, then you put yourself in a tier. And to move, for example, from a partial tier to a risk-informed tier, you have to do cost-benefit analysis. That is, if it's really worth submitting yourself to all the more stringent processes and practices that are needed to move to a higher tier. Okay. And now let's speak a little about profiles. A profile is how your functions, or the functions and the categories of the NIST framework are aligned with your business requirements, your risk tolerance, and your resources. Profiles are very useful for making improvements. Why is that? Because you first establish a profile for your current state, that is how you are now, and then you define a profile for your desired state. And in that moment, you can determine the gaps that had to be covered in order to move from your actual state or your current state to your desired state. Okay, and this will be the way to establish or improve a cybersecurity program. The first thing you want to do is to prioritize and find the scope, that is the subsystems or the processes in the company that are gonna be adjusted for complying with the cybersecurity management principles. Then you have to, once you have your priorities, you have to check what are the assets that you have there, and what will be the possible possible threats that we have in those in those assets, in order to begin our process. With this information, you can create your current profile. This is the photograph or the snapshot of your current situation. Then you conduct a risk assessment. That is how, what risks do you have to your infrastructure and your processes and whatnot. And this risk assessment, along with your current snapshot, will allow you to create a target profile. That is the place where you want to arrive. Once you have that, you know your gaps. So you have to determine them, analyze them, and prioritize them so you can take them in the order that is most convenient for the organization. Then you implement your action plan. And as you see here, this is a continuous improvement cycle. And in that case, the framework has helped you to establish this cybersecurity program. And since governance is included in it, so that could be one of the things that you want to leverage for making this cybersecurity framework work in your company. And finally, the other positive thing is that the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is aligned with many industry standards. If you open the document of the Cybersecurity Framework that is freely available at the NIST website, you'll see that, for example, let's take an example here in the identification function and the asset management category. Then you see there's references to the CIS. This is the Center for Information for Internet Security Controls. You have references to that. You have here also references to COBIT 5. Okay, we could do the work with Alex to update this to COBIT 2019 because this document, this version of the framework was generated in 2018. So this was with the standards that were current at that time. You have also the standards from the ISA, that is the International Society of Automation. They take into account not only IT, information technology, but also OT, operational technology, all that has to do with automatization and Internet of Things or Internet of Everything. Okay. Then we have the ISO 27001 and the NIST special publication 800-53. Then we have now revision 5 currently that has to do with requirements or security requirements for federal agencies in the United States. But it's also a very good document for good practices in information security. Okay, that ends up my presentation. I thank everyone for your attention. And now, Michael, if we can go ahead and take the poll question.
All right, thank you very much, Juan.
Okay.
I think, it's up now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think the answers are coming in now. So let's get to about 100 and then we can. I think for now it's between providing strategic direction and ascertaining whether IT risk is being managed properly. So.
Okay, interesting. You see here that the NIST Cybersecurity Framework can help the different organizations to ascertain if the risk is being properly managed, and it's also insightful to see that it is recognized as a good tool for providing strategic direction. Good. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. You see here. Well, achieving IT objectives comes as a third, and verify that IT resources are being properly utilized comes as a fourth one. But you see here the first one and or providing strategic direction and ascertaining if the risk is properly managed can come very close. So that will be the two main takeouts of this of this conference. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Juan. I think some questions have been answered already, but for the benefit of everyone, we can take one or two of them. The first one is answered. Second one about presentation to be shared. Yes, that will be shared with the participants. And it's also a recorded session. So the link to the recording will be shared with the registered participants as well. Then I think Adebayo asked and was answered by James. Can you quickly state the difference between the functions of a CIO and a CISO? And I think James answered by saying the CIO is primarily responsible for spearheading the IT agenda or the technology agenda, with the CISO in charge of cybersecurity or IT security related engagements. I think Guillermo also asked, what were the three main risks that a company should identify when implementing DevSecOps and cloud computing? I think Alex answered by saying the main risks are related to the responsibility of the information security across different participants and organizations. You have to govern both trends in order to optimize value. In both trends, the top management must monitor the implementation, obviously, to ensure that the intended value is achieved as much as possible and risk optimized. Yes, that's the other question. I think there are some open questions that we have to look into now. Modest is asking, the CISO role,
at what point in time would you recommend a CISO role? What's the minimum size that a company has to reach in terms of probably people or assets for you to consider a CISO role? So I think I'll get Manuel to give me his take, and then James can also give me his take. So Manuel, what minimum size in terms of an organization? It can be in form of people, it can be in form of assets, infrastructure, for you to consider a CISO role.
Okay, Michael. What I have seen from my experience working at my university, well, is that is not dependent, not so much on the number of people that are, or the size of the organization, but sometimes it is determined by legal or legal requirements. That is, for example, in my university, we have to be very careful about data privacy because we're dealing with information of minors. So any information security breach that will be there, it's considered as a very serious event. So in that case, even if our university is relatively small, we have a kind of 500 employees or something like that, we have to have that CISO role because he or she will be responsible for addressing all those security threats and to answer or to comply with the law on all the requirements that are given for dealing with that kind of information.
Thank you very much. So to summarize, a regulatory imperative would actually force you to have a CISO who will be fully responsible for ensuring that security controls and governance are in place.
That's right.
That's fine. Alex, would you want to give me something on that?
Yes, of course. Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. I think it will depend on the size. I think I want to add something else around the comment of Juan Manuel, okay? Because I agree with him. But I think that comes from the top management. When the top management are aware of the importance of the information security, and when you are going to digital transformation journey, you have to think about that function. Maybe you don't define specifically as a chief security officer, and sometimes it will be part of the chief information officer because of the size of the company. But you have to think about the role and the responsibilities, and it's really important that you have it, because now the organization has a really big responsibility to their clients to manage their information and the integrity of the operations. So I think that could be the main characteristic to make that decision.
All right, thank you very much. James, anything from you, please?
Yeah, I think for me, I'll also want to add that it's really not the size that determines whether you should have this role. I think for me, I think about three things. The first one is, what threats is the organization facing? It might be a very small organization, but the threats that you're facing are very humongous. So you might be forced to think about that role. You also have to think about the regulatory requirements within your environment or either within your country. In some countries, for example, it's mandatory for a financial institution to have a CISO role. So there's a regulatory drive as well. And then finally, you need to think about the sensitivity of what your organization is dealing with. Again, it might be a very small organization, but dealing with very sensitive data, very sensitive materials. So as much as the entity is small, then there is need to think about having that role. Yeah, so I think those are the dimensions that I'll put in mind.
All right, thank you very much, James. Thank you very much, Juan. Thank you very much, Alex. Let me go to another question. What is the most used cybersecurity framework in the world? Maybe Juan, you might want to take this. I'm not too sure you have an answer yet, but that's a question that came in. Yeah.
Okay, I would say that there is no definite winner in that question, because it depends a lot in about the region you are living in, and the region the corporation or the company is operating in. For example, in the United States, the most to use ones will be the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and the NIST Special Publication 800-53, because they are mandated, for example, for federal agencies. And so in Europe, ISO 20001 would be the most used. I don't know, for example, maybe you, Michael or James, could tell us in Africa what cybersecurity framework is the most used one. But it depends a lot on the region you are living in and your organization is operating.
All right, thank you.
In Africa, I think I've had mostly COBIT. COBIT is what I've seen featuring mostly in several African countries.
Okay, good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and in Latin America, it will be ISO 27001, and COBIT is also making a good participation in that.
Okay, that's fine. I think to add to that, I know in terms of industry standards as well, PCI also comes on strongly for those institutions that process card-related data. Let me move on to the next question. Fred is asking if it makes sense to merge the CISO and the network admin roles. I think I can answer that. I don't think it's the best. The focus of those two roles are very different, and you don't want them to merge in any way. Moses is asking, of COBIT, NIST, PCI DSS, which cybersecurity framework is most suitable for a financial institution? And what are the key criteria for choosing one? It's a difficult one, but I think I have my views on that. But I think I'll start with Alex. Alex, COBIT, NIST, PCI DSS, which one is most suitable for a financial institution? And what are the key criteria for one? Thank you.
Yes. Yes, it's interesting. It depends on what is the approach to the information security governance. Because if you are approaching to this as a governance framework, I think COBIT the organizations are aware about COBIT. It's good to hear from James that in Africa is used, the organization are using COBIT, because not all the organizations are aware about the framework and how can help the governing of information security. I think that NIST Cybersecurity Framework is a really good one. It's a really good framework in order to start, because as Juan Manuel explained, it is really well oriented of how do you identify, protect, respond, recovery. So I think it's a good option to start. But if you require a more holistic approach, a more governance approach, I am a fan of COBIT, but some companies maybe don't understand it and are not aware how to use it. But that's my recommendation. Actually, in a bank, I did a project. One of the participants of the project are here in the audience because she sent me a message. I know the big bank in Colombia. They invited me to define the processes for governance and management of information security. And I recommend them use COBIT, and I explain them why, and they agree to do that. Obviously, integrating the framework with ISO and NIST, because you require the integration of the frameworks. But that is a specific experience, and it was really interesting because COBIT and the holistic approach of the 7 components is a really well way to see this. That is what I think, but I think it's not a specific answer because it depends on regulation, as you mentioned, and there are some regulations in Latin America focused on COVID. So if you start with that, it's a good idea because you are going to comply. But you have to think. You don't have to think about it only in the compliance mode. You have to think about how the governance and management information security system will be alive. So it's important to think about it, okay?
Thank you very much, Alex. Juan, anything from you?
Well, I agree with Alex in what he says about this. For example, in Colombia, all the banking and financial institutions are required to comply with ISO 27001. That's because of a directive of our financial governing body, but the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is definitely an excellent point to start to see where you are and the point in which you want to arrive. And since you see all the frameworks are integrated, it makes all the work that you do with one of those frameworks is not lost if you want to implement or complement your approach with any other of the frameworks that are mentioned here. And as Alex says, COBIT is an integrating framework, so it will be very good to use if you want to have the governance perspective.
All right, thank you very much, Juan. James, anything from you, please?
No, I totally agree with my colleague's sentiment, so I have nothing else to add. I'm totally aligned.
Okay, so for my take, I think I also agree with all of you. The good news is they are complementing, as we said earlier, and for a lot of the central banks, in terms of their directives, they actually mandate you to have ISO 27001 or PCI based on what you have. But like I think Alex or Juan said, whatever you do to comply with one of the frameworks is not totally lost. There are a lot of integrating points when it comes to these application of these standards. So you always have that merger or that integration. Once you implement one of them, implementing another becomes a lot easier. I think there's something on which cybersecurity framework is most suitable for a mining firm. I don't know if anybody has an answer, but aside PCI, that's more or less a little card-centric or financial institution-centric or a fintech-centric. Most of the other ones are applicable for mining firms as well.
Yes, if you let me, Michael, I have a client in Peru. It's a mining company. And actually, as you said, I totally agree with you, okay? I think that you can extend. Obviously, it's different because in mining, you have to think about operation technology. And you have to think how, and there are some difference between mining and financial because, for example, in mining, maybe it's more important integrity than confidentiality because if you have an integrity issue, that could be the consequences would be loss of lives of people or natural disasters. So it's really important that you think that you require this. when I did the project in this organization, a mining company in Peru, I recommend them. I use COBIT because I am a fan of COBIT, but I try to complement that with ISO and NIST, because obviously you have to have the same parts as a financial. You have an identification of events and incident management process. You're required to identify your information assets. The jewels of the crown are different. Actually, the jewels of the crown in a mining organization maybe is not the client, is not related to the client information. It's related to the configuration of the PLCs or the SCADA systems that operate the mining process. So I agree with you, Michael. I only wanted to add that.
Okay, whilst at it, there's a question that I want you to take. Somebody's asking how you integrate development processes into the ISMS to make it safe. More or less a DevSecOps kind of thing. So you'd want to take that again just to provide clarity. That integration, in the integration of development processes into an ISMS. Thank you.
Yes, actually, I think DevSecOps could be the right answer for that. You have to think about the secure development practices. You have to go directly to some practices of development. Okay, you have to see the top OWASP controls. You have to see a specific related controls to development process. And you have to think how your system, how do your development process would include the authentication, the multi-factor authentication, the protection of the information. So my answer is you have to choose a specific controls. Juan Manuel shows some of the frameworks. You can check specific recommendations, but for me, the answer to do that and the right way would be to use DevSecOps, because DevSecOps it means is a way of working. It means to incorporate the security from the development to the operation to all the software development life cycle. So it could be really interesting to use it because it could make that the software will be safer as the person asked.
If I may add, if I may add here, Alex, the big problem here is that in many companies, security is done as an afterthought. That is, security is not considered in the requirements, and you finally have to patch the software in order to make it secure, because in some instances you make it even more insecure, but doing all that patching and all those things. So I agree with you, Alex. I think DevSecOps can help that in that case a lot, because it's a change of culture, a change of doing, a change of the way you're doing things in development, and that finally might help into considering security in the places it should be considered.
Thank you very much, Juan. James, would you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to emphasize what Juan has mentioned, where security is an afterthought. I mean, I've seen that everywhere, but I think DevOps will ensure that, you know, it's no longer an afterthought. It's something that is well encapsulated in the whole agenda. So totally in alignment there.
All right, thank you very much. I think I'll take about 2 questions. Modestus is asking, what can we do when top management is not agreeing with the implementation of an information security program on the basis of resource, more or less constraints or requirements? So more or less, I think he's looking for tips as to how to convince management that it's imperative to implement an information security program. How do we convince our management teams to get that done? Thank you.
That is a great question because it's business as usual. I think that or other organizations are facing that. So it's a personal point of view, okay? I think that if you work together, James presented something really interesting. Think about information security governance. You have to work together, IT, risk, audit, and top management together. So for me, a way that works for it is that all the lines work together and present the risk of not doing that to the top management. Because yes, you can decide not to invest on it, but what are the risks that you are facing? And all the areas must present and must define what is the level of risk of the organization, and the top management must decide if they want to take that risk, they want to live with that risk without doing anything, or they have to mitigate it. So for me, that works. Obviously, the regulation is the best answer. If you are regulated, you have to do it. But if you don't have regulations, for me, to work together with the other areas and to try to go together, because all the lines work for create value in the organization, and all the lines, I mean the lines of defense. But I know maybe you know that it has been changed for the internal Institute of Auditors, but now it says 3 lines, because all the 3 lines must work together, and the objective is to create value, and create value depends on risk optimization too. So you have to think about it, and that's a personal way that I have worked with that, because when IT goes directly, maybe they don't hear, but if you work together with the other areas, that could be helpful.
All right, thank you very much. If there's nothing to add on that question, I think I'll move on to the next one. Adewumi is asking, what's the best certification for cybersecurity audit now? The best certification for cybersecurity audit now. I know ISACA introduced a cybersecurity audit program, but I don't know if it compares with another one. So what he or she is asking is if we know of the best one, maybe we can provide an answer. But I think we can go ahead, please.
Well, Michael, let me participate there. The CSX Cybersecurity Audit certificate by ISACA, I think it's very complete. It is completely aligned with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, and it gives you an insight on the controls that can be implemented to conduct an cybersecurity audit using that framework. I forgot to mention in my presentation, there's an ISACA publication that is called a cybersecurity auditing using the NIST framework. It's a free publication for ISACA members. You can look for it and download it from the ISACA site. And the course or that certification is completely aligned with that publication. So if you want to acquire insights on how to complete a cybersecurity audit, that will be a good place to start, because an ISO 27001 audit will be centered in information security, and cybersecurity is a subset of that. So it might not make emphasis on several cybersecurity topics that you will want to check. So I think that ISACA certification is a good place to start. I don't know if it is the best, but again, a good place to start.
For the purposes of this engagement, it's the best, and everybody's advised to go look it up. So that's very okay. If there are no other comments on that, I think because of time, let me move on to one or two more questions. There's a question on who takes a CISO role in your chapters. I'm not too sure about the question. If you can retype it, I can quickly consider it panelist. What certifications are there for secure application development? Do we have anything on that? Any certifications for secure application development?
No, maybe maybe to add that DevSecOps has some certifications that could be useful to check.
Okay, that's fine. This is more or less a comment. I'm from the manufacturing industry and I'm preparing to implement a cybersecurity framework with ISO 27001. Can you advise how to start with, or how to go about it, or what to start with? So I think I'll let James start with this. Someone from the manufacturing industry wants to start the implementation of ISO 27001. If you have any tips, you can.
Yeah, so I mean, let me say that I'm not sure what the role of that person is, but for you to institute such a program, you cannot do it alone. If you are from IT, it will definitely not be an IT endeavor. The whole organization has to be involved. So IT might initiate. I'm assuming the person who is asking is from an IT department, but everyone in the organization has to be involved. There has to be buy-in right at the top. Right from the board up to the senior management. So I think getting the buy-in and getting an organizational-wide steering committee that will drive that exercise is very, very critical. So buy-in across the whole organization is important, and it will not succeed if it's an exercise that is just being driven by one department. Because remember, you need a budget, you need buy-in from everybody, you need everybody's support. So the key thing is to ensure that everybody is on board and the whole program gets everybody's buy-in. I hope that helps.
All right, that's fine. Alex, anything from you on that?
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. I don't have anything else to add. That's a very good point, James.
That's fine. Juan, anything from you?
No, nothing to add. That's clause 5 of ISO 27001. You gotta have agreement from the top directive of your company, and then it irrigates to the bottom. If you don't have agreement from the top management, you are going nowhere.
Okay, that's fine. There was a question on PCI certification for an individual. For some reason, I can't find it again. An answer was provided, but I'd just like to add up to it. I think CISA, CISSP, and some other certifications are prerequisites for that. But I know the PCI Security Council also offers the QSA, and then there's also the ISA for some organization or people internal to the organization. There's also the PCIP. But I think you can have some more information on the PCI website. I think at this point, I would like to take, let me go through these last two. Is it sufficient for an auditor with only CISA certification to do cybersecurity audits, or additional security certifications are recommended? I think we've touched on the relevant cybersecurity certifications, especially regarding audits. I think we can look them up. The pandemic will bring possible changes to NIST or COBIT, or we can comfortably. Okay, so what we are asking is, will the pandemic bring changes to NIST and COBIT? COBIT is possible. So at least these things also go through some revisions one way or the other. So I won't be shocked if there are any further revisions in future that takes cognizance of these developments. I think at this point, I'd like to take closing comments from James, from Alex, from Juan. I think it's been informative. You can give us some parting words. and then we can quickly bring the session to a close. So I'd like to go according to how we started. I think, Alex, you can give us the first closing remarks from you. Then we move on from there. Thank you.
No, thank you. I want to say thank you again. Thank you to the Africa and Latin America chapters that are participating here. This is a great experience. I really love it. And I really appreciate that you agreed to do this. And I hope that we continue doing. Obviously, I say thank you to all because I know that there are participants from Asia, Europe, United States, America, and other countries, Australia. So thank you. To close, the information security and cybersecurity governance must start from the top management, and you require the support of the top management. You have to be or to work together between IT, security, audit, risk, in order to go together to the top management to be aware of this. The tools are important, as Juan Manuel said. The widgets are important. Could be helpful sometimes if you use it in a right way, but that's not the solution. The solution is an holistic approach, and you have to think about processes, information, skills, culture, obviously tools, because without tools you cannot do this. Without automation, but you have to think in an holistic way, and you have to focus on the most important information assets, because if you don't identify your information assets and you don't know what is the jewels of the crown, I mentioned that term many times during my presentation, but if you don't have that in mind, maybe your strategy is not the most effective, and you are not optimizing the resources.
All right, thank you very, very much, Alex. I think, James, if you can give us something now.
Yeah, so I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody, for attending this function. I think what I want to say is, it's quite clear that the threats around information security are there to stay, and they'll continue increasing. My part in short is, I think, handle information security like a lifestyle within your organization, not be an afterthought. And what I mean by that is, when it's instituted within your culture, within your organization, it becomes a lifestyle. So things like security awareness trainings, penetration and vulnerability testing, it's part of what your organization does, either quarterly or biannually. And those are not things that are done only when there's a crisis. So let's make it part of our cultures. Let us make it part of our lifestyle within organizations, and we'll find it to be more useful and more successful.
All right, thank you very much, James. Juan, if you can give us some comments.
Okay, just first of all, want to say thank you to all of you for your attendance, and thank you for again for organizing this event. The experience was awesome. I hope to be collaborating in much more of these experiences. It's simply an awesome experience. For as a closing remark, I couldn't agree more with Alex and James about how to implement a cybersecurity program in an organization. And I want to make emphasis in the human factor, because many of the problems of cybersecurity have been solved or have a technological solution, but we as humans are always the weakest link. So we have to do good plans, we have to train people, and we have to educate everyone so everyone will be a good cyber citizen I would say that it's very important to make awareness of all these problems, of all these threats and everything, so you will be able to know what to do in all circumstances. And I think, as James said, culture is one of the most valuable things we can infuse in our organizations.
Thank you very much, Juan. I think it's been humbling and it's been interesting. It's been very educative as well. I'll now give the floor to Gloria to give us some proper closing remarks. And my expectation is, I hope this happens again very, very soon. It's been quite insightful. Thank you very much. Gloria, floor is yours.
Hello, Michael. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Gloria, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michael. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Salute, a toast to my colleagues from Latin America. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you so much to Alex, Manuel, James, Michael, Bernard, and Emily, who worked tirelessly to put this together. Thank you so much for your time. Attendees, for honoring the invitation. Thank you. I hope we'll have more of such collaborations as we go. And for the contributions to the cybersecurity industry and to the professionals that have been shared today, I will not reiterate any of the things that have been said. Instead, I'll say that for each of us, to each our own, we've each picked what we need to do and what we can take back to our industries and our organizations and improve. If you have any questions, if you feel you're not satisfied with the answer you've received, please feel free to send your communications or request for contact from the ISACA Kampala chapter, and we'll forward them to the right persons, the persons that have shared with you their information today, the panelists. They're experts in their fields and are available to assist you in any way they can. So thank you so much for today, Michael. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, James. Thank you, Emily and Bernard. I appreciate you all. To the members of the ISACA Kampala chapter, thank you for your continued support. To the directors of the ISACA Kampala chapter, as I tell you every time we meet, I appreciate you and I believe in each and every one of you. God bless you all and have a good night or a good day based on where you are.
All right.